Good afternoon, good evening, everyone, and happy International Women's Day. My name is Isabel Onaba. I am a communications coordinator with EllisDon's. I am also one of the communications core leaders with EllisDon's Alliance of Black Employee Experience Leadership. And I just wanted to welcome you and thank you for attending EllisDon's first International Women's Day event. Before we get started, just to remind everyone, this session is being recorded. And throughout the event today, there are a few ways that you, as attendees, can participate in this event. The first one is at the bottom bar of your screen, you'll be able to see a Q&A feature. You can enter your questions here throughout the webinar, and we also have reserved some time for a group discussion that's led by Jennifer Khan, where you can have your questions answered. There's also a chat feature. Here you can enter any questions or comments you may have throughout the webinar. If you are using the chat feature, please make sure that you have everyone selected so that your questions can be seen by all participants. We also have Jose, shout out to Jose and his team on the tech side who will be monitoring the chat for any questions around technical difficulties. And if you're unable to see any of these features, please make sure you're viewing your screen in a full screen view, and they should all be there for you. Just a small reminder on IT security before we also get started is that the meeting will be locked 10 minutes after the start time. And that means that if you leave, you can't get back in. So you might as well just stay till the end. And to avoid any unexpected guests, passwords are required for all the webinars, the entire webinar, and the password is embedded in the Zoom link that you clicked on to join us today. And on that note, let's start. I would like to begin today by acknowledging the Indigenous peoples of all the lands we are on today. While we meet today in a virtual platform, I would like to take a moment to acknowledge the importance of the lands which we call home. We do this to reaffirm our commitment and responsibility in improving relationships between nations and to improving our own understanding of local Indigenous peoples and their cultures. From coast to coast, we acknowledge the ancestral and unceded territory of all the Inuit, Métis, and First Nations peoples that call this land home. Please join me in a moment of reflection to acknowledge the harms and mistakes of the past and to consider how we are and can each, in our own way, try to move forward in a spirit of reconciliation and collaboration. So if this was more of a pre-COVID time, I would have probably been two-step dancing my way to Beyonce's "Who Ran the World," girls, girls, and just like dancing my way to the microphone. But since we are in a virtual platform, I hope that we can still acknowledge the fact that we get to connect from all the different cities, the different countries, I think, that we're on right now, and get to connect to enjoy this Women's Day event. So I'm from Uganda, which is located in East Africa. And this is also called the Pearl of Africa, but that's a conversation for another day. And in my country, International Women's Day is a statutory holiday. And so growing up, my three older brothers, my dad, and I would basically create what you would call a Queen's Day for my mother. So we would have gifts, we would have love notes, breakfast, dinner, anything you want. She was just like the queen that she is, just treated like that. And so I loved this day for two reasons growing up. The first one, I didn't have to go to school. The second one, snacks on snacks. Like, who can say no to that? But as an adult and an adult woman, I started to ask myself, what's the significance of Women's Day? What's the history behind this day? And because one of the nerdiest things about me is that I really love history, I went and I did some digging. So I'm going to give you a few dates here of things that made today the day it is. In 1909, in New York City, it was the first time that they acknowledged or they observed the National Women's Day. And this was held by the Socialist Party of America. In 1910, 100 women from 17 countries met in Denmark at the Socialist Women's Conference. And they agreed that there needed to be one day annually that we would highlight and try to amplify the need of equality. And this equality included suffrage, which was basically women's right to vote. In 1911, 4 countries in Europe, Austria, Denmark, Germany, and Switzerland, celebrated the first International Women's Day. In 1914, Russian women observed the first International Women's Day. In 1917, women in Russia in the textile world decided to have a protest. It was a strike that was called Bread and Peace because they wanted to end World War I. A few days later, they were given the right to vote. In 1922, China observed International Women's Day for the first time. And in 1975, the UN celebrated International Women's Day for the first time. Here we are in 2021, 110 years after those 4 countries celebrated the first International Women's Day. And even if we've made so many great strides over the period of time, we have so many left to go through until we get to where we want to be. And so even if we have so far left to go, today we celebrate how far we have come. We celebrate the voices of the women in the homes and the communities. And on that note, the I Choose to Challenge, let's watch a video with Clarice Medina, the prefabrication coordinator with EllisDon Modular and other EllisDon staff telling us about I Choose to Challenge.
The construction industry, although changing very rapidly, and we're seeing a lot more women join the industry, it's still very much a male-dominated field. As a young student who wanted to see what the field was like because I was interested, I would attend a lot of panels or events, lectures, and job fairs, and see that most of the people who attended these were male. And as a woman in my professional career, I would see a lot of meetings where there were very little women, or potentially I was the only woman who attended these meetings. And it was a bit intimidating. When I was a student, I was very concerned about whether or not I'd be treated equally or treated with respect, or have the same pathways to a successful career. And ultimately, what really convinced me to go into this industry is seeing other women present at these panels, or be able to talk to them and see what their experience was like and get advice from them to push through challenges such as this one. And the piece of advice that I have for women who are finding that there is less representation or a lack of representation in the field that they want to go into is to be the representation, to ultimately pursue it and to attend events. As young students, to just show up at events and connect to women in your field, and as a professional to attend events and inspire younger women to join the construction industry, or any industry really. Your representation would mean a lot to someone who has doubts about joining this industry, and just being there and showing up is really, really, really valuable. So, as someone who is now in their professional career, I'm really looking forward to attending more events and inspiring more younger women to join the construction industry, and to share my experiences, which has been really rewarding, and honestly something that I very much enjoy, and to tell them that, as a woman, you can definitely have a very successful career in construction.
I choose to challenge.
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 我選擇挑戰
I choose to challenge.
I choose to challenge.
I choose to challenge.
Jolie Holisafia.
I choose to challenge.
I choose to challenge.
We
choose to challenge.
Scelgo di sfidare.
I choose to challenge.
I choose to challenge.
I choose to challenge.
I choose to challenge.
Eu escolho o desafio.
I choose to challenge.
I choose to challenge.
اختار التحدي.
I choose to challenge.
I choose to challenge.
J'y remets en question.
I choose to challenge.
I choose to challenge.
I choose to challenge.
Yo elijo desafiar.
I choose to challenge.
I choose to challenge. أختار التحدي.
I choose to challenge.
I choose to challenge.
أنا أختار التحدي.
I choose to challenge.
I choose to challenge.
I choose to challenge.
I choose to challenge.
We are 100% going to cry by the end of this. Like, I have already decided it's happening. That background music just kind of gets you in the feels. So one of the things that I asked our speakers today was to tell me about one or two women that inspire them. And so for our first speaker, he mentioned something that was so interesting. He said that a lot of the women are leading our country today when it comes to COVID-19 pandemic. And so he chose Dr. Theresa Tam. And he said that when it comes to humility and leading with grace and taking criticism, she stands out for him. And so I'd like to introduce Mr. Tom Howell, who is the Senior Vice President of EllisDon's Modular and also the executive sponsor of Together.
Hi everyone. I hope you can hear me all right, and thank you for the introduction. That was an amazing opening video, I have to say. It's my pleasure to welcome everybody to EllisDon's virtual event celebrating International Women's Day, and this year's theme, which everyone knows, is Choose to Challenge. You'll hear over the next hour or so from just a few of the amazing women that work here at EllisDon. You'll get their perspectives. You'll hear about their experiences working in the construction industry and working here at EllisDon. And you'll also get an opportunity to interact in a group discussion that'll be led by Jennifer Kahn. I've got the good fortune of being the executive sponsor of this group, and I can tell you the Together group with the chair, Christine Cito, what an amazing group of individuals. They're so passionate. They're passionate about gender equality. I'd encourage everybody to keep an eye out on EllisDon's portal in the coming weeks and months for all of the great things that group will be doing. I'd also like to just take a minute and thank Jennifer Kahn, who I think had the idea for EllisDon to host this event, and in particular because I suspect it's something that's quite unique in the construction industry. I don't imagine that too many of our competitors are doing something like this, so great job. On a personal note, a number of people at EllisDon will know this already, but I'm a very proud father of two teenage girls, the oldest of which is going to be heading off to university this fall with plans to take over the universe, so keep an eye out for that. And I'm also the husband of an amazing leader who works in the financial services sector, who, like so many women in her career, has experienced gender bias throughout her professional career. And in preparing for this evening, I was reminded of a comment that a senior bank executive had made to my wife many years ago. And I won't repeat the comment, it was inappropriate. But what was shocking to me was that I didn't hear about it until many years later when my wife was featured in a video and she was interviewed and recounted the experience in a diversity video that she was involved with. And in fact, that video forms part of the diversity training that EllisDon has put out in recent years. So many of you will have seen that clip, although you won't know which one is my wife. And so, like many others, and particularly those early in their careers, it was something that my wife simply dealt with, but it certainly had an impact. And so thinking about that encounter, it seems quite fitting to me that the theme for this year's International Women's Day is Choose to Challenge. What a great theme. And like all of you, I'm looking forward to hearing from our speakers this evening and to learning more about their experiences working both within the construction industry and in particular their experiences working here at EllisDon. I hope we're a different company. I believe we are. And with that, I'd like to hand things back over to Isabel. I'd like to welcome everybody for joining us here tonight, and thank you for joining us here this evening. Thank you.
Thanks, Tom. So my sister-in-law got me my first women empowerment socks, and they said, "Fight like a girl," and they had boxing gloves on them. So I rolled with the punches, pun intended, and bought myself a whole bunch of women empowerment socks that I wear quite often. I'm wearing a pair right now. I'm wearing my favorite pair right now. And they say, "I'm a girl. What's your superpower?" And so it brings me great joy to introduce our next speaker, who is using her superpowers to create to have the discussions and the conversations of gender equality in our industry. And she's using her talent, her skill, her influence for the good. I'd like to introduce the chair of Together and also the director of mechanical and electrical pre-construction with Vancouver Buildings, Ms. Christine Sezo.
Thank you, Isabel. So my name is Christine Cito. I'm the chair of our gender equality group Together here at EllisDon. Together stands for Balance and Harmony, Gender Equality Team, Human Empowerment Redefined. Our goal is to ensure equal treatment of all gender expression by discussing gender-related issues and identifying areas of improvement. Before I get started, I just want to take the time to thank everyone that is participating in this event and supporting EllisDon in celebrating International Women's Day for the first time. I want to thank everyone who is listening, all the speakers who are putting themselves out there and speaking about challenging subject matter, our marketing team, our people and culture team, and everyone else behind the scenes that supported this event to make it happen. You know who you are. We are hearing from truly inspiring women that work in the field of construction at EllisDon. They work in various business units from different geographic regions across the company. Thank you to everyone for participating in such an important event. So I'm going to start with a little bit of background on myself so that all of you listening can understand who the heck is this person who's giving the keynote address. Well, I grew up in Scarborough, Ontario, and I went to the University of Toronto and graduated with a degree in mechanical engineering. I've always worked in male-dominated industries, including aerospace, consulting engineering, and now construction for the last 9 years. And as Isabel mentioned, my current role is the Director of M&E Pre-Construction for the BC area. I am a mother to 2 beautiful children, 4.5-year-old daughter and a 20-month-old son. Today, I'm going to speak to you about choosing to challenge. I'm going to speak to you about challenging your own unconscious internal bias and challenging external biases. What is unconscious bias? It is the process of associating stereotypes or attitudes toward categories of people without conscious awareness. It is important to understand that our unconscious mind makes up 90% of our decisions without us being aware of it. So I'm going to ask you now to close your eyes and help me visualize a scenario. You're walking down the street with your group of best friends. Nobody knows or has even heard of COVID-19 or even mentioned the word pandemic in the last year. It's a beautiful summer's day. The sun is shining in downtown Vancouver, and you can see the North Shore Mountains and Pacific Ocean in the background. You're walking by a construction site, and there you can see an individual working on the structure of a building, wearing a hard hat, full protective equipment, and welder's mask. You stand there and watch what they're doing. They complete their work, come down the lift, leave the site, remove their PPE. Is this person a man or a woman? So let's be very honest with ourselves. For most of us, our unconscious minds made the decision for us before we even knew it, that that individual was a man. I would have been one of them. Despite the fact that I am a woman in construction fighting for gender equality, my unconscious mind made the decision for me before I even knew it. My entire life, the image of your standard construction worker or person working in a STEM field has been that of a middle-aged white male. It's what we see in the media. It's the reality for 96% of the tradespeople and over 3/4 of the workers overall in these fields. So what's next? What can we do to disrupt our internal or unconscious bias? We need to have the courage to examine our own behavior. We must emphasize that these individuals could be male, female, or any form of gender expression. Let's work together to consciously turn the unexpected into the expected. We must be part of the change. And just like Clary said earlier, we must be the representation. Expose yourself to people that don't look like you. These are the things that we need to do together to challenge and disrupt our internal bias. So I'm going to change gears here a bit. I'm going to speak to you about external bias. I'll tell you about a situation that I found myself in at the beginning of my career and how I overcame it. So let's go back. It's the start of my professional career. I recently graduated with a degree in mechanical engineering, and I'm ready to take on the world. I start with one of my first big assignments. My boss puts me on a complicated project that was experiencing some challenges. Part of my role was to help work through the issues and resolve them. Well, my boss came to me and said that he had something to share with me. After I was introduced to the client and the project team, the client went to see my boss after the meeting and said, "That pretty little girl ain't gonna cut it." So I'll say it again. That pretty little girl ain't gonna cut it. It's been 15 years and I have not forgotten those words. I was extremely upset and offended by that comment. My first reaction was that I'm gonna prove you wrong, and I'm gonna prove you wrong, not with my words, with my actions and through quality of my work. I was going to show him that I deserved to be there. He had absolutely no basis to make a comment like that. Yes, I was young. Yes, I was a woman, but he had no idea of my abilities, strengths, or even my background. He made a judgment solely because I was a woman. Now I didn't change a single thing about myself. I continued to work hard, learn as much as I could about the project, and kept reminding myself that failure was not an option. I did prove him wrong. Look at where I am today. I'm a director for the top construction company in the country and the chair of our gender equality group. Sadly, many women have faced these kinds of challenges and comments in their career. So many women have to constantly deal with what we call microaggressions. It is unfortunately what can keep a woman in this industry from succeeding because it affects them so deeply, they are unable to get past it. What is a microaggression? It is an indirect, subtle, or unintentional discrimination against members of a marginalized group. Here are some examples of microaggressions towards women. It's phrases like, "Well, she just got her way because she's a woman." It's constant interruptions in meetings, dismissing an opinion. It's assuming that a woman has a lesser role in a company because she's female. That happens to me all the time. Another example is assuming that between a man and a woman, the woman must be working in a more administrative role. These microaggressions compound and have extremely harmful effects. So what can we do about them? We need to increase awareness about microaggressions. We need to continue speaking out about them and their harmful effects. Call out the microaggression, whether it's in the moment or later. The individual saying it may not understand the impact of what they said to you or someone else around you. And lastly, if you are a manager or a people leader, call out the behavior when it happens. Your team members will look up to you, respect you, and model your behavior. And these are the things that we can do together to challenge external biases. So today I spoke about challenging yourself, both internally and externally. If there's one thing that I ask all of you to remember, regardless of your gender, background, or role, it is to have the courage to challenge your internal bias, the courage to challenge your external biases, and the courage to challenge the microaggressions, whether they are directed to you or your peers. Every step we take together is a step in the right direction towards gender equality. So I will end with the words of the notorious RBG, the late Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Real change, enduring change, happens one step at a time. Thank you.
Thanks, Christine. The crazy thing with your speech is that so many women who are watching this right now can resonate so much with what you said. 1, 2 stories, every woman watching this can resonate with that. And I wore my notorious button here, especially for you, because I knew that was your person. And next up, we have a fireside chat with Jennifer Khan, the Head of Inclusive Diversity, and Jody Baker, the Chief Strategy Officer and Executive Vice President of Infrastructure Services and Tech.
Geez, I was so caught up in what Christine was saying, I totally forgot I had to unmute myself. Hey, Jody, how you doing today?
I've got the Kleenex ready, and I don't know where we're gonna go from here, but I'm ready.
Well, I'll do my best, but I can't promise anything. As I mentioned before, I've cried one too many times on these public events, and but you know what? I'm not apologizing for it, because I'll tell you, every single time that I've shed a tear or cried is because I've watched somebody be vulnerable or open themselves up, and it's moved me for their strength and their courage, not because I'm sad or weak. So let me just say to all the women out there and men, if you want to cry, I'm with you. I'm probably going to cry somewhere tonight anyway. But so Jody, thank you so much for joining us today. As you can see, I've prepared the fire for us on this cold March day. You know, just to kind of get us started, when I was growing up in an Asian family who's very much has an Asian culture, there were 6 women in my family, and they were the complete matriarchs of who we are and what we did. And a lot of them always said and reminded me, Jen, find your voice, find your voice. And I think that's the advice of a lot of people who mean well to say, women, find your voice. And as I mature and I wear my feminist t-shirt loud and proud, I'm like, no, women out there, you don't need to find your voice. You always had a voice. We just need to find ways to amplify it. And I think events like tonight provide such an amazing opportunity for women like you and on their panel tonight and through the discussion to really amplify their stories so that other women listening can really identify and, as Isabel said, resonate with it. So I just wanted to first off say thank you for helping us to do that and sharing your stories as well.
Well, thank you, and thanks to the entire Together team for putting this together. I think, you know, I'm so excited to be a part of it. I'm honored to be a part of it. I can tell already, based on what we've seen so far, it's going to be a great event. And I just really congratulate Christine and your whole team in bringing this group together on International Women's Day.
Awesome, thank you. So as you know, I have a few questions for you. So I'm gonna ask you those questions, but I might add in some follow-ups depending how the mood strikes me today, if that's okay. But if we get started, I'll start by asking you, why do you think groups like Together are important for the company or even for the industry?
Yeah, I mean, I think they're important because we want to live in a world where they're not necessary. I think we want to get out of a place where we have to encourage people to join an industry because it has barriers to it. And, you know, as we've already heard this, you know, this evening, it's because we're not there yet. The biases still exist. As Christine said, all those microaggressions and aggressive aggressions, they're still out there. And I think when we get together and we talk to each other and we talk about those experiences, it's quite right that as Isabel said, you know, Christine talked about one experience that she's had. I think if you asked any woman on this call, every single one of us could tell you a similar story. And our job here is not done until those stories stop happening. So I think when we can get together and we can recognize the humanity of every person and the strength of every person in this company, we will become a better company and we'll just become a better industry overall.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I can certainly identify, and I think you're right. We all have our own stories. In your opinion, do you think that we're getting better? Do you think as an industry as a whole, there's been progress made since you first started?
Yeah, I absolutely think we're getting better. You know, one of the things that I think back to is, I think I'm going to say it was 2008. I went to one of the first public-private partnership C2P3 conferences in Ontario. And I had just joined EllisDon. It was a pretty big event, but not that, you know, not as big as it is today. I joined late, so I had to go into kind of an overflow room rather than the proper conference. And as I walked around that conference, I probably could have counted on one hand the number of other women I saw there. And today, as many people on this call will know, if you go to that conference, not only is it massive, but there is a much greater representation of women in all areas, all across the infrastructure industry. And it's great to see a lot more of those women rising to positions of leadership. So I'm hopeful.
Honestly, I'm hopeful as well. I remember in one of my earlier roles when I finished university, I was working for a residential home builder, and I always worked in an office capacity. But when I was working on site and I was walking the site, I had all my PPE on, and I was walking with the site superintendent, who happened to be a man at the time. And I was walking down, and there was a row of townhouses that the developer was building, and I could hear somebody was catcalling, and I could hear the whistling, and I could hear the derogatory things that were kind of coming in my direction. And I remember thinking, what is happening here? Like, why is that still a thing? Now, I'm glad to say that, maybe I'm not glad to say, I don't know, but that doesn't happen anymore. And I think that's a testament to the industry and where we're going, and all of the progress that we've made as women, as an industry, and as men who are just standing up to say, you know what, that's not how we treat people anymore. So, you know, one of the things that we heard from Christina as well is that she's a mom, and I know that you're a mom as well, and so am I. In your experience, what it's been like working as a working mother?
Yeah, I think every working parent knows that you constantly feel like you're sacrificing either your family life and the things that are important there, or something in your career. And we live in a world that doesn't often provide time for both, for all of the things that you need to do when you're working. You can either write the Valentine's Day cards with your kid, or you can write the board report that you have due this week. Or, you know, you can bake cookies for the bake sale, or you can prepare for the client presentation that you have. There isn't always time for both. And I think more often than not, we sacrifice ourselves, we sacrifice our sleep. Sometimes we sacrifice our mental well-being just to try to do all of those things at the same time. And, you know, I think about it, and I love working. I love what I do. And of course, I also love my family. And I believe it has been so important for my daughter, and equally for my sons, if not more so for my sons, to see that I can go to work and still value everything that is important to them and be part of the things that they're doing. And I'm also really fortunate to have a partner who supports me and has supported all of my goals, just like Tom was talking about, and I know he does this with his wife. You know, it's really important to be with a partner who also will make those sacrifices so that you can kind of live out your dreams. And I recognize there are lots of people out there who don't have that kind of support and the resources that I've had to do everything I've been able to do, or at least make it work on more days than not. including a bunch of single parents out there who often have harder choices to make and more sacrifices to make. And I think we've seen that more acutely than not over the last year. You know, the statistics are telling us that women took on the vast preponderance of the childcare over the last year and homeschooling. And that means a lot more women had to step back or step away from what they were doing. And in a world where women are still paid less than their male counterparts, families often made financial decisions of one person was going to stay home and one person was going to work. So I think that it's really important coming out of COVID that we recognize the lessons learned out of all of that we recognize the ability to juggle. I don't know how many of us were, you know, teaching math in the morning and doing Zoom calls until 11 o'clock at night, just to make sure that nothing fell through the cracks. So I definitely hope that we can take some lessons from that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'd be remiss not to say shout out to all the parents who made it through online schooling and to all the educators out there who are really taking it home for our kids and making sure that we're all having a great experience as best as we can. And, you know, I have two young ones, 4 and 7, and they were many times where they were part of my meetings inadvertently. And I'm very thankful that the folks on the call were very gracious about that. I remember being at a session one time, and the speaker was talking about the emotional and mental load of women. And it was along the lines of what you mentioned around women still being, in most cases, a primary caretaker and kind of running the household. And her message, and one that I've often shared with people, is you just gotta let it go. You gotta let it go of the mom guilt, the expectations of what it is to be a good wife, a good partner, a good spouse, a good friend, and just be who you are. So I think that's something that I often give as advice to women, particularly like me, who wants to make sure that all the leftovers are eaten in the right order, all the hangers are on the hook on the exact same way, all the towels are folded in the right direction. I just think that there's so many things that we do, maybe me as well, but that we can just let go of. And so on that note then, Jody, what advice would you give to people leaders and how they can best support women?
Yeah, it's a good question. I was thinking about if this last year has taught me anything, I think it's taught me that you never really know what's going on with another person. You can look at the person across from you and think that they have it 100% together, but usually you will find out that they're just really struggling with something too. So my message for leaders is all about empathy. I think it is really our greatest leadership attribute. Those leaders who can listen and really try to understand what's going on with the people on their team through their professional and personal challenges, I think those people will recognize the engagement that comes from people who feel like they're seen and heard. And I don't think it's the opposite of grit. I think you mentioned it at the outset of this call, right? It's not, it doesn't mean that you're not tough if you shed a few tears once in a while. It's not weakness. It's the key to me to the concept of power with, as opposed to power over. And I think the days of power over in leadership are done. I think it's the opposite of freedom, trust, and accountability. And I think if we can try to understand each other a little bit more, try to understand what's going on in each other's lives, then I think we're all going to be better leaders.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's so many things that people can choose to challenge for this year's theme, empathy being a really great one of them. But I'd like to ask you personally, what do you choose to challenge?
Well, I choose to challenge that so that my daughter doesn't have to. I mean, like lots of us, and like the stories that we've told here today, we all have those stories. And it's kind of funny because I was thinking about this question, and another a notorious RBG story came to mind. So she seems to be the theme of the night. But when she passed away recently, my 9-year-old daughter came to me and said she wanted to know why this old lady was so important. And, she, you know, coming from a legal background, she was obviously very important to me. But when I explained to her that Justice Ginsburg had fought against discrimination on the basis of gender for years, and she'd even been denied a job at a law firm on the basis of her gender, on the basis that she was Jewish, on the basis that she was a married mother of 2 young children, she kind of gave me this look like, what are you talking about? And I said, well, you know, Kate, that there's still people out there who think that. There are people who still think that because of the way you look or what gender you are or who you love, that that you're not as good as other people. So her message back to me is quite telling, and this is for everybody. So she said to me, well, you better get that fixed because I'm not putting up with that crap. So clearly I have to spend more time watching her language, but it was a good reminder for me and why we all need to choose to challenge. So RBG.
I love it. RBG legacy lives on forever. And I tell you, I think the future is going to be bright through Kate and all of our other kids who are just really don't understand what it is that we're fighting for and know that we shouldn't be fighting for it. A couple more questions for you here, Jody. What advice would you give to the men listening today, and how they can be allies to support women in their workplace?
Okay, well, first of all, I want to say thank you to all of the men that are on this call. Just because it's International Women's Day, as I said to a few other people, it's not a women's event. And I think you all joined knowing that there were going to be a lot of women on this call talking about a lot of tough issues. So I applaud you for joining. I applaud you for your commitment to challenging and making change happen. So I'm guessing it's not the men on this call that need the advice, because I think just by being here, you're already demonstrating that. But it's those who didn't join the call and who don't see the need for the conversation, or worse, think that things have already gotten out of hand. So I ask everybody on this call, but particularly the men on this call, to reach out to those guys. Share the success stories that they've seen. Talk about, just as Tom did, talk about your amazing wives. Talk about your daughters. Talk about your successes on your projects and how having a diverse team made you better, your project better, and your team better. And I also have to thank all of those people who supported me along the way, including my male colleagues, some of whom are on here, and those who reached out to wish me a happy International Women's Day today. I was so blown away by all of those text messages and emails, even the ones that made fun of my red hair in the portal picture. I don't remember when I had red hair, but clearly I did. And really just say thank you to all those who saw the potential in me at different times, who taught me things, who encouraged me to keep going when I was ready to quit, frankly, who accepted me as a colleague and a manager, and who challenged me and accepted it when I challenged them right back. And particularly then for the women on the call, many of whom have listened to me on a bad day and shared their stories with me and really empathized with me. I think when we build that community, we make all of us stronger. So I really want to thank everybody for doing that.
Yeah, I love it, Jody. I was talking to Laura Daniels earlier today, and she mentioned that I thought was really fitting is that for everyone to achieve gender equality, it's going to take all genders, men, women, non-binary. We have to do this together. And I think that to your point earlier, the men, women, and everybody else on this call today is part of that solution. So thank you for that. So one last question for you here. In what ways are you promoting women in the industry from an executive level?
Yeah, this one is tough for me because I think in some ways you sort of never feel like you're doing enough. And I think it's really important for me to talk to as many of the women as I can across the company and hear their stories and hear their lessons learned. I recently told somebody the story of myself early on in my career and how I came into, at the time I was doing construction litigation. That's a rough and tough world. And I thought I had to put this persona on and be this kind of tough as nails, emotionless, maybe even in some circumstances, ruthless kind of person. And not only was it exhausting, but it didn't work. And so I think when we share those stories and collaborate with each other, it's really important. I mean, we have to do things like take part in these events. We have to get out and speak about our own experiences. And, you know, as was said in the video earlier, we have to set an example. I think about some of the greatest advice that I ever got on this front. And the advice was, you might feel like you can't succeed. You might feel that there are even people out there who don't want you to succeed. But for every one of those people, there are 5 more people that are looking at you and hoping for your success, even if you can't feel it or see it or hear it. So I think that's the advice that I would leave with everybody. I will do my best in my role to make sure that I call out all of those biases, whether they're overt or unconscious, that I see. I challenge everybody to do the same thing. And I think collectively, if we continue to do that, we are going to change this company. I think we're going to change this industry, and ultimately we will change the world.
What a wonderful sentiment. Thank you so much, Jody. You know, thank you so much for sharing your insight. Thank you so much for your time and sharing your experience with us. I'll say personally, I also want to offer my own thank you to you. I remember the days I sat in your office and just, you gave me the safety and freedom to just be myself and say the things that I wanted to say, feel the emotions that I wanted to feel. And you gave me a place where I could laugh, where I could cry, or where I could scream. And I just want to say that impacted me so very much. And I am so thankful to be not only here with you today, but even in your sphere of influence so that we can continue the conversation. And Jody, honestly, I'm not the only one. Your impact on the organization and people across the board has been far reaching. And I wish that I could have gotten to everybody, but unfortunately I couldn't. But I did get to a few people who have a few words that they want to share with you today.
Hi, Jody. I wanted to take this opportunity on International Women's Day to say thank you. Thank you for giving me opportunities in my career at EllisDon's and supporting me in the career decisions and choices that I made. Thank you for helping create a culture at EllisDon's where women support other women. And thank you for being a continued source of guidance and inspiration in my career. Happy International Women's Day. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jody, for all your support over the past few years, for always having an open door, and also for your friendship.
You want me to do a 1-minute thank you video for Jody Becker? Sure, I'd be happy to. I've been her assistant for 11 years. She's the best. Wait, 1 minute? That's like having to pour an ocean into a shot glass. If I had to stick to 1 minute, maybe I would just start from a purely selfish level. That I'm grateful that I get to work with somebody as awesome as Jody every day. She's wickedly smart, humble, understanding, patient. She can keep all the moving parts of a $1 billion deal clear in her head as if they were a 3-item grocery list. She never makes me feel bad because I can't. Her work ethic is relentless and her stamina is unheard of. Her calendar is the craziest thing I've ever seen. I know, I helped coordinate it. She can land at 5:20 a.m. from an overnight flight from Dubai and still show up to the office for an 8:20 a.m. meeting with a smile. Somehow she manages to balance all of this with a family, a personal life, and playing on a soccer team. She also mentors, guides, and provides advice to anyone who seeks it. I think she easily handles all of this as she is of solid character and knows exactly who she is. She is also a very active listener. Not just the kind of listener you're told you should be, nodding of the head, look the person in the eye, but truly present. Eventually, people may forget what the advice was, but they will never forget that feeling that someone took the time, cared, and engaged them. I know that feeling has stayed with me, and in turn, I am learning and trying to repeat what I have been shown. Kindness breeds kindness, understanding breeds understanding. Jody, I can't possibly fit everything you mean to me in a 1-minute video, but somehow I won the boss lottery. I'm so very proud of you. I am one of your biggest cheerleaders, and I will continue to help you chip away at the ceilings of glass. You've been such an amazing role model, and I've been so lucky to learn about work, relationships, and life from you. I'm so very humbled and grateful. Thank you from the bottom of my heart.
Oh, you guys suck. Oh my God.
You know, it's crazy. After watching that video, I'm just like, I want to be Jody's friend too. Like, do we all just want to be Jody's friend? I want to be your friend. I mean, I'm going to be like messaging you after this. I feel like you're going to get lots of friend requests. But it's also interesting that you mentioned empathy. And when you were talking about, and even the video, when it was going on about all the different things that you do, Jody, I started thinking about one of the ladies I look up to, who is Jacinda Ardern, because Jacinda Ardern gave birth, was breastfeeding, running a country, you know, telling people what to do. And that's why I believe women are we have superpowers. We just have them. They don't really show, but we do have them. Next up, we have
Thank you so much.
We have a video by Claire Ashby, the Vice President of Sustainable Building Solutions. And it's called The Journey of Flexibility and Vulnerability.
When I decided I was ready to start my family, like most people, I thought it would be a relatively straightforward process. Little did I know it would take 3 years, endless medical procedures, and a whole lot of tears and heartache to finally have our wonderful daughter, Augusta. During this time, I took a step back from my career, thinking time away from a stressful job would help. I very quickly realized that that wasn't the case for me. I'm someone who's always enjoyed work, and in particular working in a team environment towards a common goal. Although I knew I wanted and needed to get back to work, I honestly couldn't reconcile how I was going to give a new role my all while also navigating all the appointments and medical procedures that go along with fertility treatments. Additionally, how could I be open with an employer about my situation when success meant an impending maternity leave? As someone who had removed their wedding ring for interviews in the past after being asked a few times point blank when I would be having children during the interview process, being open with a potential employer about my situation seemed like complete career suicide. During my job hunt, I reached out to Jody Becker, EllisDon's Chief Strategy Officer and Head of Infrastructure Services and Technology, for some career advice. As it turned out, Jody and Joey Como were looking for someone to join EllisDon to take on a business development role in relation to the US market. I'm so glad I did. They listened, agreed that the flexibility I was asking for was doable, but most importantly, showed a great deal of empathy. I distinctly remember Jody remarking that at any point, any one of us can get hit with a personal circumstance that requires more flexibility at work. I can't tell you the sense of relief I felt. 7 months after joining EllisDon, I finally got pregnant with my daughter. And I truly believe that being able to focus on work while also being provided the flexibility I needed was a huge catalyst in getting pregnant. The reality is, I believe women are strong and will always find a way to power through and figure things out. So the advice I have is for leaders. Flexibility is important. During those early months at EllisDon, I didn't actually take any additional time off, but I was able to schedule my holiday days to align with my treatments, moved them around without seeming flaky if I needed to, and I shifted my work days to start and end later than normal to accommodate early morning appointments. It made my life much less stressful than it otherwise might have been. The other message I would have is around the importance of ensuring a leadership team that really truly can show empathy to their team members. One of the best ways to do this, of course, is by having a diverse leadership team. However, it also helps if leaders open the kimono and share some of the challenges they have gone through, as well as their own vulnerabilities. Infertility hits 1 in 6 couples. Hearing stories not only from female leaders in the infrastructure space, but also men on how they navigated their struggles in starting a family made me feel less alone and as though I could share my experience. We often put on a brave face at work, but the reality is we are all people with lives and struggles outside of work. Creating an environment where there is empathy and flexibility is so important, especially for women who often are taking on significant responsibilities outside of their work life.
Well, I put my glasses on because now it's down to business. And now it's about asking the questions that you all have today to some of the folks on today's call. I just wanted to say thank you to Claire Ashby for sharing her story about her family and her journey to get there. Infertility is a very difficult thing to deal with if you feel like you're the only one who's not doing it. Many of you know that I've also had my own challenges. And I think one of the things that we've done a really great job of, including tonight, is sharing the stories and sharing the experiences of topics that as women, as a community, we just don't talk about. And to share, or to use Claire's words, when we do this, when we talk about infertility, when we talk about miscarriage, when we talk about all the things that good women don't talk about, we help each other feel less alone. And I think that's exactly what we need to do as we continue to work towards equality and making sure that we're all in this together. No pun intended there. So now we are moving towards our group discussion, and so we have folks today who are going to be happy to answer any of your questions. So I'll remind you that there is a Q&A feature on the bottom of your screens. If you just click on the little 2 chat bubbles there, you can certainly submit your questions, and I've got the Together team kind of feeding me the things that I'm going to be asking the group. So feel free to put in your questions, and I will do my best to get to as many as I can. I guess I will start with Christine. Christine, to put you on the spot, I mean, I think that you deserve it, but can you tell me a little bit about your reaction when forming Together and when you were asked to chair this group? What were some of the emotions and thoughts that were going through your head at that time? Oh, and you're on mute, just so you know.
I need to unmute myself. Where do I even start? Gender equality is something that's been so important to me my entire life. I think from the time I was a kid, growing up with 2 brothers, an older brother and a younger brother, to going to university and being one of 10 women in a group of 120, to working in male-dominated industries. It's something that I've fought for my entire life. So I have to say, when I was asked, I was honored that I could lead a group of very passionate individuals to work on gender equality. And at the same time, it just makes me, how do I say this right? It just reaffirms the decision that I'm working for such an incredible company, that they're going to put themselves out there, support inclusive diversity with what you do, and with the group, with Together on Gender Equality and Able and Allied. It's it's just such an incredible experience, and I am honored to be leading together. Really am.
Honestly, thank you, Christine. Over the past few months, we've had an opportunity to kind of get to know each other. And I remember when I first talked to you about the experience, one of the things that you said to me, because I gave you an out, I said, are you sure you want to do this? And you just said, you know what, Jen, I want to do this. And it makes me so uncomfortable and it's so outside of my comfort zone. And that just tells you how much I want to do this and how important this is. So I just want to say, Christine, thank you so much for putting yourself out there, for sharing your stories, not just for today, but also inspiring the women here and around you tonight and today, wherever you are. Thank you for your leadership. It's we're feeling it across the board. So thank you for that.
Thanks, Jen.
Laura Daniels, who is a core leader on the Together team as well. Laura, the question for you today is, why are days like International Women's Day important?
Well, I think back to Isabel's introduction at the beginning of this, talking about the important dates in history that are tied back to this day. So it wasn't a arbitrary holiday that was just chosen just because. There's a lot of history to it. And I think this day is a moment to reflect on all of the women who came before us as part of this movement to fight for things like suffrage and voting rights. And there's so much history behind it. It's a moment to reflect on that, but also to recognize individually how far we've come and to provide inspiration to keep this going. And I just, like, today I've had a smile on my face for the last hour. And I just think this is a total representation of the inspiration that we want to carry forward and to be motivating factors for people to recognize their biases, like Christina's saying, and take those opportunities to grow from this. So I think it's both looking backwards and forwards.
Yeah, thank you. And we mentioned this before, but it is going to take all of us. And I think that the work that we're doing is absolutely amazing. So to follow that up, then I'll ask the question both to Isabel and to Jane as members of the ABLE group as well as Allied. In your opinion, what does collaboration look like amongst the three leadership groups between Together, Allied, and ABLE? What is it that you think that we can do together to really move this and push this forward? So maybe I'll start with Isabel, if you don't mind.
Oh, sure. Thanks for that question, Jen. So one of my favorite quotes is, if you want to go fast, go alone, but if you want to go far, go together. And I believe in collaboration as a way that we're able to strike out a lot of the things that we want to make change in. If you look at Together, I'm a woman. If you look at ABLE, I am Black. And if you look at Allied, we're looking at stopping racism as a whole. And so we are so aligned with our goals in life, and just kind of combining that and saying, hey, what can I do? How can I support your event? How can I support you? And that's working towards the goals together is just a way. And it comes down to conversations and communication, and us seeing where the loopholes are and what we can do together to move forward.
Thank you as well. Jane?
You stole everything I wanted to say, Isabel. We should have practiced. So the only thing I will say on top of what you just said is that we can leave nobody out. This is, our endeavors to be totally inclusive are corner to corner. And there is nobody, including the elusive men in the crowd, that should be left out. So it is absolutely a position of complete inclusivity across the board. So we're absolutely, I think, united. There's so many intersections that make sense here, and it's just, we have great momentum as an organization, as and I think I think EllisDon broadly has noticed, and that's the point. So it's more and more work to do, but absolutely, as much as I think Christine, Sam, all of us realize that it's a commitment and time and energy, it is absolutely the right thing to do. It feels so darn good, even though I'm starving tonight at 6:03. I'll admit it, it's the right thing to do. So more and more.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't know that everybody at EllisDon knows this, but I want to make a point to say that the three groups, ABLE, Allied, and Together, we don't work in silos. In fact, Samuel, Christine, and Jane and I, as well as Kanwar Panu, who's our inclusive diversity coordinator, we meet every month and we talk about what it is that we're working on, how we can work together in the present and in the future. So when we look at intersectionality and when we look at inclusive diversity, it's not happening in 4 separate groups, it's happening all together. And I think that's an amazing feat for us to do. Jody, I know I put you in the hot seat before, but I'm going to ask you the last question here. The question is this. The request is if you can elaborate in more detail on how men can help this move this movement forward.
Okay. Oh, I lost my life. Bear with me.
All right. Oh, there we go.
Sustainable. Yeah, it's a great question. I think the best answer I can give is really just to open your ears and open your minds and be open to the possibility of women on your team, you know, the inclusivity of everyone on your team, as diverse as it can be, in order to get all of those different viewpoints, to understand any challenge from a different angle. I mean, the great thing about having diversity in a team is because everybody's going to come at it from a bit of a different viewpoint. And usually among all of those viewpoints, you can find the best solution possible. So I would just say, please open your minds, open yourselves to the possibility of change. And as I said before, I've had the great privilege of working with so many men in this company who this is not even an issue for them to consider because their minds are already open to it. They're great leaders. They encourage the women that they work with to succeed to the greatest of their potential. They're looking to mentor women on their teams, and they're looking to promote them. And that's what we have to, I think, really focus on over the coming years. We have to look at how women can get promoted in this company better than they are today. So if there's a role that's coming up, please look carefully at your team and consider whether there's a woman who might be right for that role.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I think, you know what, one of the things that we can take away from today's event as well is to offer more resources for allyship and maybe give some more people some ideas of how we can do this together. So on behalf of the group from Together and the peoples from tonight listening, I just want to say thank you to everyone for answering the questions and participating in the discussion. And I will kick it back over to Isabel to take us through the rest of the agenda.
Thanks, Jen. I feel like we're going to nickname you EllisDon's Oprah. It might stick. If I kind of keep rolling with it, it will stick. So our next speaker, Laura Daniel, is a project coordinator in Toronto Buildings, and she's also one of the core leaders with Together. And so when I asked her about somebody who inspires her, or a lady who inspires her, she mentioned Kim Ang. And I was reading a lot about Kim Ang, and it was pretty impressive that despite her being general manager of the Major League Baseball, she's also I guess she holds a lot of roles again in NFL, NHL, and NBA and MLB. But also one thing that highlighted for me is that she interviewed 10 times for it and was rejected 10 times before she got it. And that perseverance goes to show, but again, what women do. We persevere until we get it. And so over to you, Laura.
Thanks so much, Isabel. And to everybody else, thank you so much for being here today. I'm honored to have the opportunity to speak with you. And I'm just, as I said earlier, smiling from ear to ear from all of the other people who've been able to join us tonight. In my experience, the biggest challenges are often found in small everyday moments. Those times where you find yourself replaying the moment over and over in your head, thinking about what you said, and sometimes more importantly, what you didn't say. It's those times where someone makes an offhand comment about the boys getting together for a drink after work, or when you walk past the meeting room to see a meeting going on that you know you should have been a part of. It's those moments where I find myself feeling challenged the most, because those are the moments that make you question your abilities and impact your self-confidence. After experiencing enough of these moments, I decided that I was no longer going to allow the actions of other people to impact how I feel about myself. So instead, I started focusing on the things that I can control in those moments, such as how I communicate. And that has significantly changed not only the frequency of those moments, but also my own confidence as to how I reacted. When I find myself left out of a meeting or not being given an opportunity to try something new, I first talk to someone that I trust about the situation as I perceived it. Sometimes I worry about whether or not I'm exaggerating or being overly dramatic. And so talking about it helps me get to the bottom of why I'm upset and whether or not this is something that I can just let go. If it's not, I write down a list of points or thoughts on the situation. And this does two things for me. First, it helps me get to the root of why I'm upset. Having time to think and reflect allows me to really dig deep to get an understanding of my feelings so that the real problem can be solved and not just a symptom of the problem. Second, these conversations are not easy. And since emotions are usually involved, it can be difficult to stay calm and collected. Writing out points gives me a mental checklist to keep the conversation on track. When it comes time to meet with your manager or the person who can help you through the situation, you want to calmly explain your points and talk about why the problem is negatively impacting your work experience. Allow them the opportunity to share their view on the situation because sometimes we may not have all of the facts. For example, if you were left out of a meeting, perhaps they took a look at your calendar and saw you were booked up for the afternoon, so they didn't include you. Or they weren't the one who created the meeting invite and didn't double check to make sure that you were on it. Having all of the information is really important to make sure that you have a productive meeting with your people leader. Make sure that you use this meeting as an opportunity to reiterate your career goals. Share why it's important for you to be considered for these opportunities. In my experience, they're pretty receptive to the feedback. And at the very least, you'll know that you've done everything you possibly could to set yourself up for success. Make sure that the conversations that you have with your managers are focused on you and your career. Don't compare yourself to others. That's when you start to lose confidence in yourself. Effective communication skills take time to develop and ultimately takes a lot of practice. It's not going to be easy because advocating for yourself is not easy. In fact, it can be quite uncomfortable. It takes bravery to stand up for yourself, and each conversation gives you a chance to be more brave. Bravery that turns into confidence, and confidence that in those tough moments will help you stand strong in your abilities and help you remember that you can do it. Tough moments are going to happen, but dealing with them on your terms and with confidence will lead to less disappointment and frustration. Use effective communication strategies to help navigate this, so you never find yourself saying, I wish I would have just said something again. Thank you.
Thanks, Laura. So one of the most interesting things is that a few weeks ago, I was having movie night with my niece, my 9-year-old niece, and I wanted to watch Emperor's New Groove, and I was convinced that this is what I want to watch. So I just tried to convince her to watch it with me. And she said, no, I don't want to watch that. And I was like, why? Can we just watch Emperor's New Groove? And she turned to me and she said, I want to watch something that has a strong female lead. And that got me right in the chest. I was like, man, my sister-in-law is doing such a great job. So Women's Day is not just about women in the workplace. It's about women in the communities, women in the homes. And that's why it's so timely that I have this story, because you look at Isabel Solis, who is the project manager with Toronto Buildings, and Eric Nort, who is the assistant superintendent in BC. And they both told me that the two women who inspire them are their moms. And so I'm going to pass this over to Eric and Isabel.
Isabel for leading us into that. Just to start it out, my name's Eric Nort. I've been with EllisDon's since May 2011. Started in Vancouver and then got moved to started in Toronto, got moved to Vancouver. Currently at Penticton Hospital, and yes, I am a member of the Core Together group. Isabel, if you could tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so my name is Isabel Selva. I've been with EllisDon's for 2.5 years, but I started in the consulting and construction industry when I joined a consulting company in 2004 as a summer student. And I love what I do, and I'm passionate about what I do. So I'm happy to be here today to share some of my experiences and to get Eric, your perspective. We've heard a lot from women today in the company, and I think it's great you're on our team and we can sort of get a male's view of what's going on. So I think to start off, what kind of challenges have you faced?
Well, I think, you know, one of the challenges I faced is just experiencing and seeing some of the challenges that are faced by females in the industry, right from even a post-secondary, you know, experience. It was always male dominated. And obviously I went to Waterloo and again, it was just, everything was male dominated there, specifically in engineering. And that translates over into the industry as well. You know, a lot of it's male dominated, especially, you know, I've seen it on construction sites. There's a small representation of females. And I think that's the root of the challenge is for us to close that gap and make the construction industry more diverse, right from skilled trades to suppliers, office staff, management, and quite frankly, client groups as well. I've worked with some women in the construction industry, and all of them have been brilliant problem solvers. They've been leaders, entrepreneurs, and overall are the perfect example of the diversity that we need. And they also serve as an inspiration for, you know, who we could be and where this company can go. So that is the challenge is how do we get more women into the industry? How do we retain more women in this industry, in this company? And I'm excited to be part of this change. And it's been exciting, Isabel. I know we've had a few chats leading up to this Fireside. It's been interesting getting to know you as well and hearing about your experiences. And I'm wondering if you can just share some of those experiences and challenges, and how did that lead you to joining the Together group?
One challenge came to mind when I was approached about this Fireside chat, and it sort of has to do with something that Laura mentioned and just microaggressions, and I think mentioned a number of times. I was in a meeting, we were working on a design build project and I was the design lead, but my company wasn't designing, it was another company. And as many design build projects go, we were approaching the value engineering phase. So we'd gotten together with the design team to find areas where we could cut back on the cost of the project. And the lead engineer started giving out papers with his calculations, and there's probably a good 6 of us in the room, and he started handing out the papers and handed one to the person to my right, looked at me, said, "I don't care what you think," and then moved on to the gentleman to my left, gave him a piece of paper and kept going around the room. To be honest, and I know you asked me what did everybody else do, I can't remember, because I think in that moment, I was just in shock that something like that had happened. Fortunately, I worked with a group of great people who just encouraged me to keep moving, and a lot of them were men, and I'm very grateful that they did, because it was a demoralizing moment. I went home and it was not a fun evening for me, but at the same time, it just meant that I was going to prove myself and show that I deserved to be where I was. And I think that's, you know, I made a conscious decision to stay in the industry because I have a passion for engineering, for construction, and I love what I do. But I also made a conscious decision that it wasn't going to be easy. And I'm not saying anybody's career is easy, but I knew that this is what I was going to face. And part of what I want to do, and the reason I'm here today and I joined the Together group, was I want to improve it for the women who are here, because most of us are passionate about what we do. And I want to make it easier for Jody's daughter or for the next women coming up in the generation, just to, you know, face the regular day-to-day problems that are, how are we going to lift the heavy piece of equipment, not to be told at a meeting, I don't care what you think because you're a female. So that's why I joined the group. Why did you join, Eric?
I spent a lot of time thinking about this question, and honestly, when the invite had come out, I thought to myself, I really don't know how I can contribute to this, And it wasn't until someone actually tapped me on the shoulder and said, "Hey, I think you should join, and you might be able to help here." And that's when it really got the ball rolling in my own head to say, okay, well, what types of things can I help? And listening, understanding problems, and understanding what's going on, I think is the start. I want this industry, this company, to be a place that's equality for everyone. I think of my kids, and like the rest of the sentiment that's been shared in the chat is that we want this to be a place where they can have careers where they don't have to worry about certain things or certain barriers, right? I think two of the people in this company, just like you mentioned, Isabel, that there are people in this company where these barriers need to be removed so that way we can all become better together and have equal opportunity. That's why I joined this group. That's why I sit on the panel and listen and learn, and that's, I think, the purpose of the group. And already in the infancy of this group and the small time that I've spent together, I've had some interesting conversations with different colleagues, some of them tough and uncomfortable. I was on site one time, and the conversation started with someone, and they came from a very close-minded, maybe perspective would be a good way to say it. And it was just about listening and saying, okay, well, I understand your problems, and hearing their side, having some empathy and understanding where they're coming from, and then sharing the goals of the group, saying, here's where we are now. We realize there's issues, why we're here, and then talking about the change to move forward. And having those conversations is what's important. One step at a time, one conversation at a time. And I know everyone's talked about RBG a bit tonight, and I think that message just ties in all together. I watched the documentary a few weeks ago. It was the same thing. That's how she moved the women's rights movement forward, was one case at a time, one step at a time. She laid a foundation that created a change in the landscape. And I think that's what we're here to do too. It's one conversation, one step at a time. So that's why I joined the group. And I think that ties in to my advice as well, for anyone out there wondering, especially from a male's perspective, how can I contribute? What can I do? And I think the simple answer is start having some conversations, start talking about positive change, ask questions to someone in a safe space, how they feel, and listening to what they have to say, learning, and ultimately being a leader in our industry, saying, what types of things can we do for positive change? And I think that's my advice, Isabel, as well as why I joined together, based on your experiences, Isabel, and some of the challenge that you see. What is your advice for those listening, or those not listening as well?
My advice, and it's something that I find has helped me a lot throughout my career, has just been find a mentor. Find one, find two. Sometimes I've had three at the same time. Sometimes they can be formal, they can be informal. I've had three formal mentors, I'd say, in my career. And the amount of support, advice, and just empathy that they provided helped me advance my career. And not because they pulled strings for me or because they called somebody up, but because it was a sounding board that I could go to and just work out my problems and discuss what I was going through and see what the next steps could be or where I should avoid. But also think about all those informal mentors that you're surrounded by. When I was one of my first sites, and at the second site I was on, I had the privilege to work with a superintendent. His name was Brent Heyman. And Brent was just an all-around great guy. He would be there early in the mornings, but we knew at 4:30, he wanted to get home to his kids. His daughter danced, his son played hockey, and it was just something that he would come to share with us the next day, what they'd been up to and everything. And we knew it was important to him. And looking back, I think about that with work-life balance. And unfortunately, Brent was taken from us very young, and he was, but to this day, I have a picture on my desk that for anybody else is just a picture of our entire team, but Brent's in that picture, and it's important to me because it reminds me that I love what I do, but I also love my family, and it helps me take time out of my day to just be with my family. So, and that's a mentor. At the time, I didn't think of Brent as a mentor, but to this day, he has played an important part in my career and in my work-life balance. So just find the help where you need it, and it's okay to ask for help and to get that encouragement from somebody. You don't have to do it alone. There are a lot of people out there to help. So that's my advice to everybody. So I think with that, this has been great, Eric. Thank you. I think with that, we can hand it back to the other Isabel.
Yes, thank you.
Thanks, Eric and Isabel. It's crazy because every time Eric was saying, Isabel, this, I was like, oh my God, did I miss something? Was I supposed to like say something at that moment? Caught me off guard. And our next speaker, her inspirational leader is Frida Kahlo. And one of my favorite quotes from Frida is, at the end, we can endure much more than we think we can. And I just love that quote so much. It's got me through so many times. And so Kay Paez is the Director of Business Assurance and Transformation, and I'm going to hand it over to her.
Thank you. So before I introduce the next video, I just want to talk a little bit about opportunity. If I think about my own story, 5 years ago, I made a decision to switch gears on my career, and EllisDon's gave me an opportunity, and I said, bring it. So in many ways, my story is unique, but through this focus on community outreach, I'm hoping that opportunities become more the norm and not the exception. A little bit of data. So of all the people working in construction and facilities management, women comprise only 19.3%. And even smaller is the number of women that form our front lines, particularly on job sites. So we know that our construction projects are expected to stabilize over the next year. And we also know that there is a great potential for industry jobs to grow by almost 2 million in 2022. What does that mean? It means that we have opportunities to recruit and retain more women in the industry for the better. Women can bring impressive physical labor skills, new ideas and perspectives, and more humanitarian considerations to the workplace. I think also, how we go about that is important. So we need to reach out, look for the untapped potential, and offer challenging roles and opportunities for growth. Perhaps include women in the hiring process. And I think the story you're about to hear next talks about great teams, the fight of stereotypes, and the provision of networking and support. So without further ado, here is Christine Roberts talking about her experience gained over a decade at EllisDon's and her current role as a superintendent and the team that supports her today. Please watch.
Yeah, I think Kristen's around the corner here. Hey, Kristen, how you doing?
Hey, how's it going?
Fantastic. You want to take us for a tour of this cool site?
Yeah, sure, follow me.
So Kristen, tell us what's your role at EllisDon's?
I'm the assistant superintendent on site.
So have you always been in that role here?
No, I actually started over a decade ago. I've held numerous roles from concrete coordinator, project coordinator, assistant project manager, QA's technical services representative, and now assistant super.
So that's really cool. So how long have you been in your role now?
About 8 months as an assistant super. Shall we go walk the site?
Yeah, let's go do that.
Awesome, follow me.
So I forgot to ask earlier,
Now that level 8's done, when are we doing the planter walls?
I'll have to go check on the progress, so I'll touch base with you after.
Awesome.
Awesome, thanks.
How do you think growing your career here is different than another construction company?
I think it's all about the culture. I've worked across Canada, and every site I go to, while it's very different, it's also the same kind of culture and enthusiasm that you get with your team. Super supportive.
Yeah, so what do you think it is about the construction that you love?
It's got to be the pace. Not knowing what's coming the next day. You have your plans and your best set intentions, but things change, and being able to succeed when that happens.
How did you decide on a career in construction?
Well, I always really liked buildings, and I went through for civil engineering. In my second term, I worked at a construction job. I got to see design come together with how to actually build something, and it just made sense. Hey, you got the consultant report earlier today, right?
Yep.
Awesome. You going through the deficiencies right now?
Yep, working on that right now, and I'll give you an update when you have time.
It looks like you have a really great team. If you could describe them in 3 words, what would it be?
Passionate, collaborative, and extremely supportive.
And what about the culture?
It's entrepreneurial, open, and a lot of fun.
If somebody wanted to consider themselves a superintendent, what career advice would you give them?
I tell them to try it out. There's something about getting actually boots on the field that allows for a new growth opportunity, and it worked for me. Being in numerous roles, I found out really what I was passionate about.
So we just finished our layout for the balcony, and we as built the elevation too, and it's good.
So how about something fun, Kristen? How many cups of coffee do you drink in a day?
2, but really strong.
What's your favorite building material?
Concrete, although sometimes stone.
Construction in the summer or construction in the winter?
Summer. Doing layouts in the winter is cold.
What's your favorite time of day?
8:32 a.m. right after my coordination meeting when all the subs are back at work.
What makes someone a good fit for the role you're in today?
I think you have to be driven, up for a challenge, self-motivated, and just willing to get the job done. Anyways, I should really be getting back to my job, so any other questions?
No, I think that's it. Thanks for letting us follow you around.
Well, have a great day, and it's been great chatting with you.
Such a great video. And on a side note, look at people in t-shirts. I live in Edmonton, so whenever I see those t-shirts and, you know, people just hanging out, I'm like, oh, it's coming. The future is looking warm. Our next speaker is Mallory Zimmerman, and she's a senior project manager in British Columbia. And so when I asked her who the lady who inspires her is, she said Rosemary Lipman. And Rosemary is EllisDon's chief information officer and senior vice president of digital and data engineering. I always love it when I see women supporting women or women looking up to women in the company. So over to you, Mallory.
Thank you, Isabel. So a quick background on me. I am a mechanical engineer by education. Went straight into construction after graduating. I moved to Calgary and worked with EllisDon's there for 6 years as a project coordinator and assistant project manager, and then transferred to Vancouver. And I've worked here as a project manager for 5 years. So 11 years total, and it's been amazing. I really love the industry. I love the work. The people I work with are wonderful. The leadership I've worked with is amazing. My coworkers and peers, and generally it's been a great experience. But that's not to say that I haven't faced gender inequality and gender bias, unconscious or otherwise. And one thing I've learned is I can't control what other people do or how they behave or what they say, but I can control how I react and how I respond to those situations. And in controlling those things, I can influence how I feel about the situation afterwards. So an example of that was early in my career. I'd only been on the job for a few months. I walked to the drawing table in our office, and there's a group of people there, a lot of them I didn't know. They were all men. And one person in the group commented on my outfit in a way that made me really uncomfortable. And I went beet red in the face and, couldn't look anyone in the eye. Everyone looked up for a second and went back to what they're doing. I'm sure most people, or all of them, thought about it for a half second and moved on, but I could not get past it. I couldn't speak for the rest of the discussion for fear of, blushing again and just thinking that the whole time people were just thinking, oh, there's the girl in the outfit. This was early in my career. And at that point, I already knew that I loved the job and loved the people and the experience and didn't want to have to go through that again because I expected myself to be in this industry for a long time. So I mustered all the courage I had. It wasn't easy. I was visibly shaking. I had tears in my eyes, but I went up to that person in private after and, calmly told them what they'd done had made me uncomfortable. And the act of doing that was so empowering for me. Like Jen said earlier, it's not about finding your voice. It's, for me, I didn't find my voice there. I just reminded myself that I had one. I spoke up for myself and I learned that I was my best advocate. So that moment, before any reaction came, that moment was really important to me and stayed with me in my career. And the next thing that happened was that person was really responsive. They were apologetic and sincere, understood that what they'd said had an impact on me in a negative way. And, I know it was genuine because that person then went on to treat me with respect. We had a great working relationship moving forward. And past that, I believe that they became an advocate with other people around us, reminding people how I deserve to be treated and how other women around us deserve to be treated. So, the theme of this International Women's Day this year is choose to challenge. And this was my story of how I chose to challenge. And the part that I want to emphasize is that I did it for me. Like I said, you can't control what other people are going to do and say, and you can't control how they're going to react to what you say. But for me, it was such an empowering moment to know that I stood up for myself, to know that I controlled the part of the situation that I could control and that I tried to make a difference. And so what I will say to everyone here is, you have a voice and it is powerful. We should all choose to challenge, stand up for yourself, stand up for others, but do it for you and you'll impact change along the way. Thanks.
Thanks, Mallory. It's funny because one of my mom and my parents raised 3 boys and a girl. And I always wondered how they did that. And then I realized they just started wiring my brain from a very young age. And so my mom would always tell me, Isabel, you're going to be in rooms that you're going to feel intimidated in. You're going to be in offices and meetings and conferences. And she said, always tell yourself, remember, you earned that seat and you earned that. And so for all the ladies, men, boys, girls watching today, whenever you feel intimidated in any room, I pass on the wisdom that my mother gave me to you now. You earned it. You worked hard to be there. And with that, I'm going to introduce our last speaker of the evening and this event, Ms. Jane Chapman, who is the Director of Operations and the Chair of EllisDon's Allied.
Thanks, Isabel. And you know what, I want to give thanks to everybody that put this night together. Christine, your team are outstanding, but absolute kudos to you, Isabel. You are like an incredible MC. I mean, if I was ever going to get married again, I swear to God, I'd have you come and host the evening. Your stories are incredible. And you just do this with such ease and grace. So I watched you. You were if anybody joined us in the, Abel's future sponsorship, you just did an outstanding job there. You've found your calling. So thank you so much. It's been a great night. And I'm really sincerely honored to close tonight with a few reflections, if you'll let me. So clearly there's been a lot of very brave men and women opening up tonight about their journeys and where we want to see our future. And I think it's fair to say that we've all agreed that we still have work to do. And there's been some difficult stories, really hard to hear stories shared here. And I think we can agree we've made some incremental gains, but we're not there yet. And this has been a really tough year, and this has kind of illustrated how change is needed. And it's been an especially tough year for women. There's been 1 million jobs lost since March in Canada. 63% of those have been women. And men have recovered their jobs more quickly than women have. And it's strange because the reason why men have a faster recovery rate is because there was a return to construction and a return to construction jobs by men and not women. So clearly we need to change that. So Together's mandate and the feminist movement for decades has been and will always be about equality. It's not about devaluing men. It's about valuing men and women equally, and to give women equal access to opportunities and pay in lockstep with their male counterparts. And I can't believe it's 2021 and we're still talking about this, but we have to. And I know Christine and the Together team are looking at our stats within EllisDon and how we shape up today. And it's amazing that we're making that commitment. We'll have an interesting picture about where we are, and then some really important commitments as to where we're going to be. And to me, that's exciting. And another thing, in fact, Isabel just brought it up as well, mentorship and the value, how important mentorship is. As you said, Isabel, find one. I personally have been blessed with some incredible mentors throughout my life, and I continue to have them. And they've been both men and women equally. And I hope I've paid that forward. I think that's our commitment we have to make to everybody. We all have the ability to change somebody's life and help their career if we just take the time. And Jody, everybody said this and you brought it up first, empathy is critical. If we truly listen and spend time with anybody, they don't have to report to us. They can be our neighbors, our peers. They can be anybody that we want to spend that time with. Then we can help them make great, sometimes really hard choices. And Clarice's message was really resonated for me. If you don't see somebody who looks like you, be the representation. So well stated. And I can only imagine, Clarice, that you must have had a great mentor that helped you along the way. And I'm sure you are going to be, if not already, a great mentor to others. And I got to make a personal reflection about what you said, Clarice. And I don't know if you know this. I know you went to Ryerson. We've had meetings before where you've mentioned that. And my dad was actually taught engineering at Ryerson for almost 30 years. And here's what's funny. And I kind of just reflected on this over the last few days. He had 4 daughters and he never encouraged one of us to pursue engineering. So it really kind of resonates with this statement. And my dad was my #1 mentor. He was an absolute advocate for women. He was tough and he set the bar so high for me and all of my sisters, but strangely, never ever encouraged one of us to pursue his own trade. He passed away 7 years ago, so I can't ask him why. But your video, it made me reflect on this. I don't have an answer other than to say that that was the thinking of the past. And I would guarantee you that my dad is very likely glad that this new day has come. I'm channeling my dad. He was a great guy. So, and certainly my mom would insist on it. I did want to also give a small pitch here, a few words about Allied. Our name is a contraction. It means all inclusive at EllisDon. We talked about it a bit earlier. So Together, Able, and Allied are all focused in this pursuit of inclusion. And at the root, sadly, at the root of this message is that fear and hate have no place at EllisDon. And this is reinforced from the very top. We insist that everybody must be valued and celebrated, every one of us. We've seen some really shocking incidents of hatred at EllisDon in this last year at some of our sites. And all of our teams and this incredible group of volunteers working to eradicate hatred at every step, which leads me now to go on to the theme of tonight, which is choose to change. And this is a reflection again. Change is tough. They say it's the only thing that's constant, but it can be scary. And it's often a lot of work, and you need to be brave. We've mentioned that a few times tonight. And don't forget, some people don't have the power to implement change in their own lives. They could be paralyzed with fear. They could be struggling with mental health issues, or they may be afraid to lose their job, and they need their job. So they can't empower change on their own. So when we say choose to change, we have to remember that having the choice is sometimes a privilege. And together with Able and Allied, want to make that privilege ubiquitous at EllisDon. Regardless of gender, of color, race, religion, orientation, there should be no barriers to that choice, no barriers to success, and no barriers to complete and meaningful inclusion. So when I say I choose to change, I fully acknowledge this is my privilege, and that in saying this, I have an obligation to make change happen for those who cannot. That's my commitment. And that is our commitment at Allied. So I've been traveling this road a bit longer than some of you. I'm honestly kind of bumping up against 60, and I've been working for 40 years. So I might be a little bit tougher, and I might be a little bit braver. So as I share this with you, I also have to realize that, you know what, I've had my bumps. I know what the pain is. Nowadays, I can usually anticipate it. I don't like it. But some of you who are new in your careers, just know that if there is pain ahead, and there probably will be, it's worth it. Be brave, be vulnerable, and choose to change. Be the representation, as Clarice said. It's so incredibly worth it. Don't let anybody hold you back. We certainly won't. So I am now closing the night, and thank you so much for joining us and for sharing and for listening. And from what I've heard tonight, for committing to grow and helping others to grow. And now I've already told you earlier, I'm starving, I'm still starving. So I'll let you all get home to dinner, go home, enjoy your family, and thank you for joining us.